Welcome, friends, it's the MovieFilm Podcast. MovieFilm Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about the movies. MovieFilm Podcast on the radio.
Adam and Barbara are ghosts.
What's the good of being a ghost if you can't frighten people away?
So they're calling on Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
It's showtime.
He's guaranteed to put some life
Attention, Kingword shoppers.
in your afterlife. Michael Keaton is Beetlejuice.
I'm the ghost with the most, babe.
Welcome to a movie film commentary track. My name is Zachy Hassan. I'm here with Brian Hall.
Hey, how's it going, Zachy?
Hey, I'm really excited to talk through today's selection.
Me too. We don't cover Tim Burton a ton on here. I mean, you know, the Batman films and everything, but yeah, this is like such a unique movie, such a classic, and I feel like we don't wander this corner very often. So I'm like super, even just you and I, like we don't talk about Beetlejuice and these older Tim Burton films much. So I'm really excited to dig into this with you.
It's one of those films that has just always kind of been there, like in the background of, I don't know, our filmdom. You know, it's we mutually acknowledge we enjoy it, and
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Like, it's a good way of putting it, honestly. It just kind of feels like it's always been there.
Yeah,
You know? So it's kind of fun now with the sequel coming out to, I don't know, like cue this one up and really give it an examination again, rather than just be something that, you know, you're flipping channels and you're like, oh, hey, yeah, I like this part, and you stay on it. You know what I mean? Like watching it
Yeah.
top to bottom again was a lot of fun.
it's a fun one to revisit, and certainly I've seen it a handful of times over the last few decades, but I was so appreciative of just the sort of the tactile nature of everything we were seeing, and appreciating the craft of how they pulled some of the stuff off.
That, and just seeing, I mean, like filmmakers, you know, Danny Elfman, Tim Burton, the actors, like just making something wholly unique that is so specific to them. It's just a really, all these years later, it's still an exciting thing to see, you know?
Well, I'm excited to dive in and watch 1988's Beetlejuice. I'm assuming that those of you listening have some degree of interest. And hey, if you want to cue it up and watch along with us, we can give you a chance to do that while we take a short break. And we're back and queued up. I'm ready. Brian, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, we are watching Beetlejuice. There's only one cut. It's the 1988 theatrical release, and we're going to hit play on 3. I'm not going to say it 3 times because that could cause some trouble. But we will do the usual thing. So 1, 2, 3, play. And here we go. 1, 2, 3, play.
Let's get the Geffen logo here.
That's going old school.
Yeah, it makes me think of like my old Nirvana CD or something. He'd eventually team up with Spielberg and Katzenberg.
Yeah, for their failed attempt to rival the big studios.
Yeah, DreamWorks SKG.
More like Broken Dream SKG.
The boy fell out of the moon.
Dream doesn't works. That's the lesson. Well, first off, right up top, how great is Danny Elfman's music here?
He is just on fire. Like, that's the thing too. He came out of the gate as a film composer on fire. Like, I mean, right?
This score in particular is the most Danny Elfman score that Danny Elfman ever Danny Elfmaned.
It is, because even Batman, which is so Elfman, is adhering to a gothic sort of tone and the superhero triumphant sort of nature of the story and character and whatever. But this is him like unleashed, you know, like his sort of gothic, scary circus sounding thing.
I mean, just to put this in perspective, I watched this movie a few days ago, in prep for this with my 13-year-old, and literally the music starts and he goes, "Danny Elfman, huh?"
Yeah.
Yeah. I do. By the way, worth mentioning, this music is itself so interesting because when Elfman got the script initially, he sort of had a different idea in his mind. He thought it was going to be a little grimmer, and so he started writing the music.
Hmm.
And then he starts seeing the rushes, and he's like, oops,
Ah.
I didn't write music for that. And so he kind of Elfmaned it up, and it's really interesting because the movie itself, I mean, it's like a good half hour plus before we even see Beetlejuice, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's fair, like the tone doesn't really kick in until Keaton shows up, and so very smartly, this music right up top clues the audience in. Oh, this is a lark. This movie,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, but I mean, he of course, headed up Oingo Boingo in the 80s, and then his first film score was Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which is incredible. But I'm amazed that in a different sort of style of music composition, like film scores, he came out right out of the gate, seemingly fully formed, like knowing what he sounded like with an orchestra. And it was so uniquely him. That your son can hear it and go, "Oh, Danny Elfman."
Isn't that extraordinary? I mean, especially at that moment when he emerged. I mean, he was doing something wholly unique.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Love it. And this is a fantastic score. And then had you heard that story too, where I guess Lionel Newman was hired to conduct the score?
Really? I had not
when
heard
they were
this.
recording it, but on the first day he kept making changes to the score because I think some of the weird time signatures and why would you put a note there? That's weird, kind of stuff. He was trying to clean it up or whatever, make it sound a little bit more, I don't know, mainstream or something. And so eventually he was let go and he was replaced.
Wow. I had not heard that.
Yeah. Doesn't this just feel like a different Alec Baldwin?
I was about to say, I don't recognize this guy.
Yeah. I mean, there is like I don't know what the year is, because this is, to me, Hunt for Red October, Alec Baldwin also.
Sure.
But then there's like a certain moment where he kind of switched into a different Alec Baldwin, a different build, a different face, different tenor.
I mean, by the time we got to The Shadow, he was like proto Jack Donaghy.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah.
So yeah, this is 88, so just a couple years before Hunt for Red October. But this is for sure the first time I saw Alec Baldwin, and I definitely remember seeing him later and not realizing he was the guy from Beetlejuice.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And apparently he wasn't very high on this movie. Baldwin wasn't very high on this movie for a while, and he felt like he didn't do it right. Like he didn't perform in a way that he thought was very good, or he was saying when he was making the movie, he didn't quite understand it. And then watching it later, it was like, oh, which is kind of interesting, actually, to what you just said about Danny Elfman. I mean, now we watch him, we're like, oh yeah, Burton. You know what I mean? But like, yes, right. They did not have that benefit then to know. And that's what's so interesting watching this. Sorry, I hope I didn't cut you off. But like,
no, not at all.
I think watching this, it made me really appreciate that Burton, when he's doing full Burton, which he hasn't done in a long time, he's very dark, but he doesn't cross a line.
That's
like
true.
There's still sort of a campiness to his dark. He's not like grisly, right? Like he goes there a little bit with the scary faces, her ripping her face off and stuff, but it still feels almost like fun, campy, spooky carnival haunted house.
No, I
I
agree with that. I agree with that.
Which makes him
by
really
the way,
interesting.
I wanted to mention real quick, I like the subtle touch of the fact that they're listening to Harry Belafonte.
Yes.
And that just like so it doesn't come out of nowhere when we get a couple of Harry Belafonte musical numbers later. It's like, oh, they're just fans of his.
There's a lot more seeding in this movie than I realized when I rewatched this closely recently. I mean, with the dog, for example, here in the town. Which is kind of funny too. I mean, I know that's calypso music, but it made me think of like mambo music, kind of. Where I remember in The Simpsons in season 1, Homer and Marge were into mambo music, and it seemed like for a certain generation that was thought of as like dorky parent stuff. And this is like right around when The Simpsons debuted. So I wondered if that was like a part of that. It's like, oh yeah, they're kind of like these dorky adults. They like this kind of music.
That's funny.
This is such a funny joke. This barber.
Yep. There was an alternate ending where the barber is in the waiting room next to Beetlejuice.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so Beetlejuice is having to listen to the barber stories in the afterlife.
Wait, so that was something that was cut?
Yes.
Oh, that's funny. Maybe it was too sad.
Yeah, I think so. That's probably.
Yeah, but that's a funny joke.
Yeah.
Huh.
So as written originally, so the initial, this is, you'd think this is something that originated in Tim Burton's brain, right?
100%.
Like, that's the funniest thing to me, is that he was like a hired gun, basically,
Mm-hmm.
and yet it's so inextricably tied to his specific visual signature. But as written, it was much darker, and specifically this sequence here. This is in the McDonald draft. Excuse me, Mike McDowell. Sorry. Like the way in which the Maitlands die, you see it, and you see Barbara's arm gets crushed, and it's like really kind of horrific.
Right.
And there's an allusion to it, like when they come back to the house, she's like, "Oh, my arm feels cold," or something like that. But it's interesting, the choices that were made. That's my point, right? Like, this is the script lands on Burton's desk. Burton just did Pee-wee's Big Adventure,
Mm-hmm.
and he's getting a bunch of scripts like that.
Sure.
I read that one of the scripts he got was a movie called Hot to Trot.
Yeah, I heard that.
It's like the Bobcat Goldthwait and a talking horse, which did end up getting made, by the way.
Yeah.
But he, at the time, so he was in the mix for Batman already. So it wasn't like this movie got him the Batman gig. He was already in the mix for Batman, but while Warner Brothers was dithering, he was like, "Well, I'm just going to do this."
Mm-hmm.
And because people, like, he wanted Keaton because he just worked with him on Beetlejuice. It wasn't exactly like that. It was more intertwined than we think. I think this helped. I mean, this basically got, gave him probably a boost of confidence by the studio. But I mean, this is 88. Batman was 89. So Batman would have already been in the midst of production, or a pre-production
Development or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's interesting. I mean, just to go back a little bit up to what you were talking about. I mean, he began as a Disney animator.
Yeah.
Worked on Fox and the Hound, and used his time at Disney to leverage making some short films, right? So he made a movie called Vincent, about a boy fantasizing that he's Vincent Price, which is hilariously on brand.
That's right.
Right. And he did, this was fascinating. He did a Hansel and Gretel 30-minute, I don't know what you'd call it, short film, I guess, that aired only once on Disney Channel at 10:30 p.m. in 1983 on Halloween. And it only aired once because so many people apparently complained about it. Like, it was too weird and scary. And it ends with Hansel and Gretel and the witch having a kung fu fight. And I think it like recently was, I don't know, discovered or, digitized or something. And so now you can look it up, but it's, but he then went on to make Frankenweenie.
Yes.
And apparently something I read was that eventually got him fired because he was using Disney funds to make these dark little films that they couldn't do anything with. And Paul Rubens wants to make his Pee-wee movie, is looking for directors, and Warner Brothers likes this Tim Burton guy, but doesn't know what to do with him because Burton doesn't want to make any of the movies they want to give him. Rubens can't find any filmmakers that will understand Pee-wee. He watches Frankenweenie and goes, "That's my guy." And then there you go. I mean, you get Paul Rubens, you get Tim Burton, you get Danny Elfman, and boom.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, it's amazing. Like, we look at Tim Burton now as inevitable.
Yeah.
If Tim Burton didn't exist, we would have had to invent him.
Yeah, sure.
And yet there was this path comprised of just lucky breaks that led to his career,
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I mean, just to circle the square on the point you were making about Disney, I think it's the fact that he came back and he did, well, most recently Dumbo for Disney,
Hmm.
and he's like, I'm not working for Disney ever again, and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, this is where you were headed anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know. It's funny you say that he feels inevitable, because he does in our world,
Yes,
right? But I don't know, you just think this guy who at Disney, they're like, what are we going to do with this guy? Like, he's just doing all this stuff. It's so not our brand. But he persisted with his vision, and his vision has now become somewhat of a genre to us, all these years later. And I just admire that so much, where people didn't shave their edges. They stuck to their guns and their visions, and like you said, now it just feels inevitable.
I mean, think about it, right? Like, so, and obviously summer of '89, because it was summer of '89. But in summer of '89, for you and me and most people like us, Tim Burton was a name we knew.
Mm-hmm.
And how many directors did we know by name at that age?
Sure, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a household name, and the truth of it is, 30 plus years later, nearly 40 years later, he remains a household name as insofar as directors are concerned. Maybe he isn't flying quite as high as he was at his peak,
Mm-hmm.
but he's still Tim effing Burton.
And he's one of those people that you can make your internet video and go, what if, Rocky, but made by Wes Anderson?
Mm-hmm.
And they there's all these super specific visual signatures that you're like, of course, that's Wes Anderson.
Right.
And he's one of those guys too. What if, this Tim Burton? And then it's like, he just has, it happens inevitably after a certain amount of time where you get familiar with a person's vocabulary, but like, you almost take for granted that it's like, well, those are really that's pretty awesome. that there's someone who has that much of a signature style like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Catherine O'Hara, she's so good. She's just amazing, period.
And she, I mean, between this and Home Alone, she has a place of reverence for people of our generation, I feel like,
Absolutely. Yep. Well, and then she continues. Isn't it amazing? I mean, with Schitt's Creek most recently.
Yeah.
It's just so cool. And then, of course, the Christopher Guest films in there, and dozens of
She
other
looks
things,
so young here, by the way. My goodness.
I know. I think I looked it up. She's like 33 or 4 here.
Wow.
Yeah. It's crazy. Winona Ryder, 15 years old here.
She's 15?
Yep.
My goodness. I would not have believed she was 15.
She's one of those people too. It's so funny. Like I wasn't going to stick this in time, but I have COVID at the moment while we're recording. And so my wife and I were going to rewatch this together, but I had to be in one room. She was in another room. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, Winona Ryder, she's just like so singular. And even like, she's so perfect for this role. And it's funny because from the other room, I was thinking that the other room, Federica, my wife, was like, Winona Ryder. It's like, sometimes you discover these people and they're just a personality of their own, and it's just, they're perfect for a role. And then they're just destined to be.
Well, especially when you look at the list of people who auditioned to play Lydia. Mm-hmm. You got Sarah Jessica Parker, Brooke Shields, Lori Loughlin, Diane Lane, Justine Bateman, Molly Ringwald, Juliette Lewis, Jennifer Connelly, and Alyssa Milano.
Wow.
That is casting a very wide net.
Yeah. That's a good point.
But they landed on the right person. It's the I don't know if you ever watched the Saturday morning animated show.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
That I saw that first before I saw the movie.
I don't remember, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I for sure because the show was like 89 to 91, 92, something like that, and I definitely because I became familiar with Beetlejuice post facto with regards to Batman. It's like, the guy who did Batman also did a movie called Beetlejuice, which also starred Michael Keaton. That was in my frame of reference. Then I saw the cartoon, and in the cartoon show, which is, I gotta say, it's a lot of fun. That's
my memory of it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's Lydia hanging out with her crazy buddy Beetlejuice,
Mm.
which is very much not the movie.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I mean, it makes sense.
She goes off and has wacky adventures. He's like, the real world is boring. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. And then she goes and has a crazy,
That's funny.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, he's such like a perv in this movie.
Yes.
It's like you almost forget. Wait, I have to point this out where she takes her face off here. Gina Davis.
That's nice.
That I will never forget. I think the first time I ever saw this movie was when it aired on television.
Okay.
And it was exciting because it's like, yeah, kids talked about this movie. I knew it was like a thing and I wanted to see it. And so I'm watching it on like CBS, which is like edited for television. It's all safe and whatever. And that was shown exactly as is. And I was like, ah, as like an 8-year-old or something like that, 9-year-old. I'll never forget that.
That's so funny. See, I remember watching this movie on cable.
Uh-huh.
And again, I came at it having watched the cartoon first. And I was like, hey, Lydia, she's in the cartoon. I know her,
Right.
And then Beetlejuice is like, hey, I want to marry the girl. I was like, oh my God.
Yes. Yeah. But that's kind of what they did in the 80s, right? Like they would make Rambo cartoons and shave off the edges of all these like harder edged characters, try to make them kid appropriate. How many people were I mean, I don't remember the animated show. Was the family in it?
The family was in it. The Maitlands were not.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, but Delia and Charles are in it, and I mean the show I give it credit because Burton was involved, maybe in just a cursory way, but it certainly preserves his sort of bonkers aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I recall, the biggest change I remember is that the afterlife, instead of calling it the afterlife, they call it the neither world.
Oh, that's funny.
Which kind of makes sense, I guess, because they don't want kids thinking about death while they're watching, while they're having their Fruit Loops or whatever,
Right, neither this world or that world, I guess.
Yeah, there was also a line of Kenner action figures, which was based on the movie.
I feel like I kind of remember those.
That I remember. So you had a whole bunch of different Beetlejuices, which they look like Keaton. You had an Adam Maitland figure with like funny. A removable head and stuff, It's so weird.
Kind of a dorky dad action figure.
I know, that's funny. Yeah. He had like a swappable head that looked like that weird beak thing that he does,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I don't know how well those toys sold, but I do. That was back when Kenner was just turning everything into a toy line,
Yeah. I love all this stuff too, by the way. The awkward, like, I don't know what you'd call like dummy puppet, whatever, headless.
It's great.
It's just so. It's
but
fun. It's like this perfect balance. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I think it goes to what you were saying before, where there's still something weirdly sweet about Tim Burton's sensibilities, even though it's it dips into gore and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
It's I mean, when you think about it, this is on the same spectrum that includes movies like Ghostbusters and The Frighteners. It's doing something different, but it's part of that continuum.
Yeah. No, those are good. Yeah. I just love how, I wonder if this was always in the script too, or if this is a Burton-y thing. Like this, it's so weird that if they try to leave the house, like they're condemned to be stuck in the house. And if they don't, they end up on like one of the moons of Saturn, with like sandworms and
they're on Arrakis. That's where they are.
Yeah. And then obviously, see, this is the thing too that I really admire. And sometimes when I watch Family Guy or something like that, and they'll do a joke that only 200 people understand, you know what I mean? Out of millions. I'm like, how does he get allowed to do that? Now he get, of course, because it's so hugely popular. But you look at this, and you're making a big studio movie for Warner Brothers. And first of all, you get to have sandworms on some moon on Saturn, but then they look like these really awkward handmade, stop motion puppets that look like a child drew them.
Yeah.
And then, Warner Brothers not saying, we need to clean that up. We need to make it like a little more polished and cool, something a kid would want to play with. I mean, it looks literally like a Tim Burton drawing because it probably literally is. But it's so cool that he got to do his thing, and then his thing became a thing, you know?
Well, so you just nailed it right there. That's the beauty of it, because this movie wasn't made with the multimedia franchise in mind. I mean, who could possibly imagine this becoming a multimedia franchise, right?
That's a good point. You know what? Yeah, that's a good point. They must have thought, I mean, I saw it cost $15 million to make.
15 million. Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, cool. Like, we get to make this funky little thing that maybe becomes some sort of, makes its money back and becomes some sort of cult hit or something, you know what I mean? Like, thing down the line for us that people revisit on Halloween.
Right.
But they didn't realize they were launching a brand.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. You know what else I love?
I mean, what a concept. What a concept.
I know. It's almost infuriating.
It's
people don't get to do that
antiquated
anymore.
way of thinking.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying?
No, I also wanted to point out just that crazy shot of the house there. That it just looks so surreal, but real at the same time. I think I've brought this up before, but I don't think Tim Burton gets enough credit. You know, everyone is like, oh, his style, his spirals, his, you know, those sorts of drawings that come to life.
Right.
But his framing is so great. Like, he doesn't move the camera a lot compared to other directors, but he has really evocative framing and use of lenses, and of course everything that's going on within the frame that just conveys so much without a whole ton of movement. And I notice it in all his films, and I freaking love it.
Such a great point.
I mean, even just like, look at that, like the low angle and some sort of weird lens that makes that look slightly surreal.
Yeah.
Setting up that part of the house. This reminded me of something from another movie that I cannot place. The thing coming through the window unexpectedly, like a peaceful.
That does sound, that does seem like something.
Oh, I know what I'm thinking of. Christmas Vacation. When they're sitting at dinner and they're talking about, oh, should we have gotten a tree? And then the tree just right through the window.
So in the original draft as written, there were two daughters. So there was Lydia, and then there's a younger daughter who's like 8 or 9, and the younger daughter is the one who can see the Maitlands.
Interesting.
And as they're making the drafts, and this is just like the normal process where it's like, well, why do we need 2 characters? Why, like we can compress this,
That's fast. I mean, that's like it makes me think of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where they literally shot the movie. There was 2 more siblings, so there were 4 Bueller siblings versus the 2. And
I had no idea.
Yeah, and if you watch the trailer, the original trailer, they're in it.
How funny.
This woman feels like a very Burton-y character, or I should say, it reminds me of in Edward Scissorhands, sort of the neighbors who go around and sort of, I don't know. I keep thinking of like a Ned Flanders word, like biddies.
Old biddy. And Landers is an old biddy.
Yeah, I don't even know if I'm using that correctly, but I mean, like, famously, Tim Burton grew up in Burbank and found that completely nice, normal suburb horrifying.
Yeah,
and it shaped who he became. There we go. I mean, I guess somewhat famously, Beetlejuice, the character, is only in this movie. I've seen 2 different times, but I've seen 14 and a half minutes and I've seen 17 minutes. But
yeah, right around 15-ish sounds right.
Yep.
But certainly he imbues every frame with his presence, which is the ultimate measure of Michael Keaton's success in the film.
Yep.
They originally wanted Sammy Davis Jr. Tim Burton did.
What's weird?
For Beetlejuice.
I can kind of picture it. You know what I mean?
It's so bonkers.
Yeah, put like some like a moldy old suit on him and some cobwebs and him being like, "Hey man." Like, I don't know, like I can see what Tim Burton was seeing.
Yeah.
Obviously I like what we ended up with, but
I mean, Keaton was suggested to Burton, but he turned it down initially.
mm-hmm,
And he said it was partly because Burton is so kind of like in his own head
mm-hmm.
that Keaton couldn't like see, he couldn't catch the rhythm of what he was saying.
Sure.
But eventually he came around to it, and you realize like what a fruitful partnership this has been.
Oh yeah.
For the two of them, obviously decades later they're still working together, but like that itself is interesting. Where you think about like these, I have to imagine that Michael Keaton is grateful for the mark that Tim Burton left on his career, but for him taking a chance on Beetlejuice, it happened.
Yeah, definitely.
Put
more tools in his belt.
Yeah, I mean, I said this in a different commentary, but when Keaton, when he did Batman Returns and he was talking about the film, and they said to him, "Oh, would you come back and do a third one?" And he said, "If Tim is doing it, I'll do it."
Mm.
And that shows how. I mean, when it comes to Batman, I mean, they backed up the Brinks truck, and he said no.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, it really is. Isn't it interesting too? I read a story with Alec Baldwin, I guess, where he went up to Tim Burton seeking some advice or direction, and he said that Burton was drawing and wouldn't even look up to talk to him. He was so in his head, and doing whatever he was doing. And it's funny because with someone like that, you can imagine. Obviously, it'd be difficult to communicate with that person, and what you were saying earlier, when you're Michael Keaton and you're reading the script and you need this thing brought to life in your mind, he might not be the best person to do that. But then when he's given the chance to make the thing and present the thing, this suddenly becomes a calling card where you're like, oh, that's what this guy's doing.
Yeah.
He's lucky enough that he got to make his calling card sort of thing.
Right. I mean, it's certainly Pee-wee was not yet that calling card type movie,
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly specific.
It has his sensibilities, but it's I mean, he's
not
it's
this.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's his first movie out the chute, so obviously he's going to be a little bit restrained. Like, I think, this is me personally, I think by the time you get to Edward Scissorhands, this is like Tim Burton in his purest form.
I agree. Yeah,
it's unprocessed Burton,
Yes, totally. Yeah. I mean, should we talk about Jeffrey Jones?
Well, I guess we need to, right?
I mean, we don't have to get too into it, but I guess we should say the disgraced Jeffrey Jones, found guilty of some heinous sexual things.
Yeah.
And has not been working since, and not in the sequel.
Not in the sequel. Yeah, I mean, he had a quite lengthy career, throughout the 80s and 90s,
Yeah, I mean, I'd forgotten he was in Amadeus.
He's in Amadeus. I was going to bring that up. Exactly.
Probably most famously the principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah, and he did, voiceover work. He was in a movie called Ravenous about cannibals.
Yeah.
With Guy Pearce and yeah, I mean,
it's weird.
Yeah, it's apparently what ended up surfacing with regards to Jeffrey Jones started with an investigation of Paul Rubens.
Oh, wow.
And it ended up pointing towards Jeffrey Jones.
Wow.
So that, I found that kind of interesting,
Yeah, weird. Yeah, it's always weird. It's like you have to, some of these movies that become classics, and then you have these people, you have these revelations about them later, and it's just like, you have to sort of,
you have to build a barrier in your mind a little bit.
Exactly, and just look at the character. I love this vision of the afterlife waiting room. It's like I say, I mean, it's this perfectly weirdly Burton-y thing. Like, you can imagine giving it to 50 other directors, and they might lean into the gore of it, or too much of the silliness of it, or whatever. But he strikes this weird, specific balance where it is dark,
Yeah.
but it's campy and fun at the same time. Like the guy with the shark on his leg, or the
Right.
chicken bone stuck in his neck.
Or that football team that we see.
Yeah, that one always kind of makes me sad, I have to admit. the line where the one guy's like, "Oh, we didn't survive that crash, did we?"
That's right.
Aw, like, of course, you get the moment where they're dancing at the end. You're like, okay.
Yeah, see, they're fine. They've
Sure.
come to terms with it.
Yeah. But I don't know, just all this stuff. Like that's what I love about it. Again, give this scene and say like, yeah, a guy who's like burnt to a crisp, smoking a cigarette in this weird waiting room. Give it to 50 other directors, and you're going to get something that's too much this, too much that, whatever. And it might work in its own way, but only one guy is going to give you this.
Well, and I can't help but wonder what's going through Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis's minds as they're sitting here going through this, because you're really relying on your director to see you through,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It is a leap of faith,
Yep.
See that one right there where she's like, I wouldn't have had my little accident. She holds up. I'm like, did she slit her wrists? Like, what happened there?
That's what I think. That's what I took it as.
But that's not an accident.
I know. Yeah, she doesn't like wink wink when she says it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. This guy is just so, just this whole walk through this room with this guy who's flattened to a pancake and these, oh man, I love this. Even the lighting, the green and the blues and the.
It's easy to sort of take for granted now because of the Burton filmography and, but like this had to have been something so out there back then. But then it makes me think like, there was a time when we would see stuff like this where it was kind of, it was skirting the edge in terms of, is it aimed at families? Is it not? But you could have stuff like this that did attempt to sort of balance between genres,
Isn't that incredible? You could say, hey, this director's got a vision.
Yes.
Let's put it out there and see what people think. And then this ended up being the number 10 highest grossing movie of 1988.
Yeah.
There was room for it. There was nothing like this yet. And people embraced that.
That's the unfortunate thing about where we're at now, where I'm like, where is the Beetlejuice now? And I don't mean Beetlejuice.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Right? Like where's the thing that's kind of finding its own little niche? I don't know. I just don't think there's a market for it unless there's some kind of a franchise or an IP attached to it.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I should point out the guy who explains the exorcisms are deadly for the dead.
Mm-hmm.
That's the guy from Pee-wee's Big Adventure, who's like, the worst accident I ever seen.
Wow. Okay.
Well, Burton has his sort of unique stable of of actors.
That's one thing you got to say. People who work with him, they tend to want to come back and work with him again. So that's something.
Yeah. That was great too. I don't know her name offhand.
Sylvia Sidney, who plays Juno.
Yeah. She's so good. And you get the sort of gruesomeness of her, the slice across her throat, but she's smoking, so you see the smoke come out of it.
She was also in Mars Attacks.
Oh, she's the grandmother.
The grandma, that's right. So
wow,
that was about 10 years after this, give or take.
I haven't watched that in a really long time.
Yeah, I've only seen it a couple times back in the 90s. So
it's making me want to do a rewatch. Like I haven't gone through these older Burton films. That's the thing. His career has been so interesting where he was making these things, these Edward Scissorhands and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But then he kind of got pulled into that. Well, what if we applied the Burton aesthetic?
Yeah.
To Alice in Wonderland, and I gotta admit, at the time it was like, I don't know, what does that look like? That could be interesting.
Right.
And it kind of felt a little more homogenized and watered down and whatever than I think. Well, to be fair, that movie made $1 billion. But it actually probably brought some younger people into the Burton fold. But then you end up with Dumbo eventually, which just didn't work at all. And so I kept saying, like, man, I want Burton again. I want Burton to make something from his brain. I want to see that again. And then that's, in a week we're getting the sequel, Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
So that's what I asked for. I want to see him making his stuff again.
I think Burton is very much an acquired taste, and I've said before, I think he's somebody who has to be matched with the right subject matter, and to me the nadir of just trying to plug him into anything and just sort of letting it happen is Planet of the Apes, because I've said it plenty of times. You talk about the absolute wrong person for that material. I think that's his Planet of the Apes, and I'm sure Tim Burton would agree with me.
Yeah.
Because it's not like he has a lot of fond memories of having worked on that movie.
I know, but you can imagine at the time the tantalizing prospect.
Yep.
What if Tim Burton remade Planet of the Apes?
Yeah. What does that look like?
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
But he just works best when he's able to let his freak flag fly and do the things that tickle his fancy, like Mars Attacks and this stuff.
It's interesting because like you have a movie like Big Fish, for example. Right. And a very, very, very much a Burton joint.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's doing something a little different. I think it stands out in his repertoire,
Yeah.
And so I think that's sort of the right approach when it comes to how to finesse what he brings to a story. I think just plugging him into an IP, it has rarely worked. I mean, just at a glance, Dumbo, the Planet of the Apes, and Dark Shadows.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, remember Dark Shadows?
Yeah, I mean, no. Yeah. By the way, when he kills that fly and the whole "help me," I was like, that was like a reference when we were kids.
Isn't that funny? Yeah,
and it would be on The Simpsons and all sorts of things, but that's not a reference that I think your kids would understand today.
No, not at all.
It's funny. They have their window, I guess.
And we've talked about it before, how like our exposure to syndicated reruns and things like that sort of extended the half-life of these pop culture references.
Yeah.
In hindsight, to an abnormal degree, it was lengthened,
Yeah, that's a good point. Things that should not have, the window shouldn't have been as big as it was for us, but it was.
That's what it is.
Yeah. It's funny. Goulet.
I was just about to do that.
When he said putz, like I said, I was watching it in the other room as Federica. I sent her that GIF from The Simpsons where he's like, Vera said that?
What's funny is so just by chance we had watched the casino episode of The Simpsons like a week earlier.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So as he comes up, I was like, your manager said for you to shut up. You ever said that? And I was like, that's the guy. And they're like, oh,
right. Yeah. It's funny. I mean, yeah, I know him less for his music and more for being the villain in Naked Gun 2.
Right, totally.
Yeah. And of course, Will Ferrell's amazing impersonation of him.
That's right.
This is kind of a cute idea. These sort of dorky people, their idea of what a haunting is supposed to be like.
Right.
Just wearing these bed sheets.
See, it's interesting that the story, like that, the Maitlands are our focus, but the struggle is that Beetlejuice is the most interesting element. So, like, you have to balance how much of him, like, is it, I'm sure those are the things they have to think about. Like, well, how much of Beetlejuice do we want in this story? How much do we want it to, like, how do we split our focus?
And
apparently the answer is about 15 minutes worth. That's the magic number.
But it's like what you said. I mean, you feel him through the whole movie, which is them sticking the landing in a way.
I think it's interesting in terms of how the credits are listed at the very start, where we have Alec Baldwin getting top billing and Michael Keaton is the and.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And I was talking to my 13-year-old. He's like, "What? Michael Keaton wasn't even a big enough star to get top billing?" And I said, he's the and. I was explaining like credit placement and negotiation. I was like, "No, your agent gets you the and if you don't get the top billing because that's just He's like,
That's so funny. I can see him at the cafeteria table, at lunch on Monday, explaining as they're eating. They're like,
it's like, no. If you're the and, that's a big deal.
Oh, yeah. All the kids. Yeah. And this is kind of a cute idea too. This kid with a special ability. You know what I mean? Like, is able to see the dead, and I love that she even read the book.
And you know who Tim Burton plugged into when he got a hold of this, right? Lydia is clearly the surrogate for him,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone reads the book but them. Like she, you know what I mean? Like she knows the rules. I love this whole thing with the model too. It's like I don't know, it's just a clever narrative sort of conceit. So you can plug this ghost being in and he can shrink down, but it's like, yeah, but he's in the model right now. And you know what I mean? It's just a very clever idea.
I think, as written originally, there was no saying his name 3 times to get him out. It was just once he's out, he's out.
Oh, so he is able to freely do that?
Yeah. So in other words, like, I think that was they realized, like, we need to put some limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, as written originally, it was much darker, as we talked about. And Beetlejuice in his true form is like a winged demon.
Right.
And he wants to murder the Dietzes. He doesn't want to scare them.
Yeah.
He wants to have sex with Lydia. He doesn't want to marry her. Like, all these weird, like, you look at it now, you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
But that was the initial, that was the germ of an idea, right? And so the comedic aspects came in with Warren Scarron, who of course also co-wrote Batman, by the way. And like as originally conceived, Beetlejuice in his human form is kind of this diminutive Middle Eastern guy. And I'm like, well, don't do that.
Right.
I'm like, hey, now, come on. So it's weird. Again, this, like, it has to start somewhere, right? Like, we can be like, well, that's stupid. It's like, but look, you got to start. You put it out there, and you prune it, and it gets to something. But that's the process.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of the process.
I think that's fantastic advice. I was reading about Michael McDowell, who originated the idea.
Yeah.
And he was just a person who was kind of intrigued by death, and it was just, you could see where the Lydia character comes from. And so anyway, he writes the first version of this script, and he was working, I want to say, like Walter Hill's company or something.
That's right. He was like an exec.
Yeah. And then I guess he turned it in, like, what do you guys think of this? I don't remember who said it. I don't know if it was Walter Hill or another executive. But they called him into a meeting, and he thought, oh, this is going to go well.
Right.
And they were basically like, so this is what you want to put out there with your name on it? Kind of a thing. And it's like, who knows? Who knows what that first draft was? But like you said, it starts somewhere, and this became something that we're talking about 30 years later. So I don't know, man. Sometimes you just need to not be afraid of your ideas.
I mean, that really is the takeaway, right? And especially because it seems like he was fine with the way the idea changed. If anything, he died 25 years ago, and it makes me sad that he didn't live to see just this remarkable afterlife that the movies had. I mean, he got to see it become like a franchise, but like he didn't live to see it now, like 35 years, 36 years later, and it's still, you know what I mean?
Yep.
That's a real shame.
Yep. I mean, we're at the cusp now of the real digging in and having a moment with Beetlejuice for the first time. And what are we at?
45, almost 50 minutes at this point.
Yeah, crazy.
Yep.
I love this. Again, going back to the model, like, you know, the model grass and the
Yep, I love that.
board there is
cardboard and stuff. Yep.
That's cool specificity. I love it. Interesting too, by the way, his spelling, the spelling of his name, Beetlejuice, within the film is like the star, Beetlejuice.
The star, that's right.
Right. And so, I mean, you have to imagine that was some sort of marketing thing for the poster, you know, where like, no one's going to be able to say the juice part. It's like with Geuse. But isn't that funny? I mean, that's the only place that it's spelled that way, right? Is on like marketing materials.
That's right.
Otherwise, within this universe, that's not how it's spelled at all.
That's true.
I mean, this is just so. It's like hard. It's like you want to watch it, like you don't want to talk through it, but just watching energy.
That's the thing, right? Is Michael Keaton? You talk about a chameleon of an actor.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, we got Beetlejuice, Batman, Birdman, Clean and Sober.
Yeah.
Robbie Robinson and Spotlight. You know, I mean, what a career! Like, talk about living a character actor's life.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, truly one of our great living actors.
Definitely.
You know?
And it's funny too. I mean, seeing him, because I know him through his characters first and foremost, but when you see him interviewed, he is kind of like it does feel like there's a little charge running through him at all times. He's a little jittery. Right. You know what I mean? And so it's funny seeing how he takes that genuine spark inside of him and he channels it through all these different characters. You know what I mean? Like a weird little live wire energy or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing is Beetlejuice. It's another thing is Bruce Wayne. It's not, you know what I mean?
Yep. Well, I think like just as a compare and contrast, you know, you put Beetlejuice next to Bruce Wayne, and it's like, here's an actor who knows when to go. I was gonna say when to go nuts, but like he you know, like for me, what makes his Bruce Wayne work is how the quiet moments, and it's just his face, and you're just watching his face. I think I've said to you before, one of my favorite scenes in either of his movies is when he goes to Crime Alley and he just puts the flower down.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's just his face. He doesn't say anything, you know?
Yep.
And then you see just the manic energy here. Like, I mean, this is, you know, I'm an unabashed Michael Keaton fan, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So we were talking about the title. You know, Warner Brothers did not like that it was called Beetlejuice.
Right.
And so they wanted to call it House Ghosts.
Yeah.
Which, like, that sounds like that's like a Disney, you know, made for TV Sunday evening movie, right? Like,
right. That's
what it sounds like. Tim Burton suggested Scared Sheetless.
Right. Hilarious.
I think the studio was like, and he's like, no, I'm joking. It's a joke, right. For God's sake.
Exactly. So then, of course, well, let's call it Beetlejuice, but then it's spelled super weird, and you can imagine them being like, sort of like Sean Fanning, lose the, it's cleaner. It's like, what if we spell it like the actual beetle and juice? It's cleaner. So I guess this was an actual sort of like outtake that they kept in because the tree wasn't supposed to fall over.
Is that right? That's so funny.
And him being like, nice effing model. Like, and that's so just him in the moment. And
that's their PG-13.
Which is funny because it's not rated PG-13. This is one of those rare 80s PG F-word movies. Wow.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah. Spaceballs, Big, and Beetlejuice.
Yeah, because at that point, my son, my oldest, he was like, hey, is this PG-13? I said, I guess so. Like, this is my kids. This is how they look. Isn't that funny?
That's hilarious.
Oh, there's an F word. So PG-13, huh? You know? So Glenn Shadix here, he also passed away. He
Yeah.
was also he was in a whole bunch of different movies. Like we used to see him a lot
Mhm.
back in the day. He was in Demolition Man. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's in that. He's also in. He's actually in Planet of the Apes. He's the during the dinner scene. He's the heavyset
Right.
orangutan, I think.
That's right. I can picture that now.
Lisa Marie plays his girlfriend.
Right. Burton always getting his girlfriends in the movies.
Well, I was looking for Lisa Marie in this, but I guess he hadn't met her yet.
I read in the trivia, who knows if this is true or not, but his girlfriend is the pair of legs with the sawed in half girl.
Ah, okay.
I had read for the Otho character, they had also looked at John Candy.
Oh, you can totally see that.
100%. I like where they went.
Yeah.
Because Shaddix gives this really obviously very specific energy I think is perfect for this movie, but you can picture it completely.
I think the problem is Candy would kind of overpower it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he's John Candy.
Yeah. I like the sort of sass of this version.
Right.
Where you can sort of picture the John Candy, his kind of chuckle at the end of his sentences.
Right.
Which we love in other characters, but for this character I like him being sort of the opposite for Lydia, he pairs well with the mother, this wannabe artist.
Absolutely. By the way, Dick Cavett, how random.
So random. I know.
Is that Dick Cavett?
I know.
And indeed it is. Not playing Dick Cavett.
No. Yeah, so random. You can clearly see this is like a lot of this stuff is like Tim Burton, the old movies and TV he used to watch.
Yeah.
And wanting to hire those actors and personalities.
So the great thing about this sequence here, this is the Deo sequence, is the actors, Jeffrey Jones, Catherine O'Hara, Glenn Shadix, all of them, they make you believe they are being forced to do this. That's how good they are acting.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, like they're not being pulled by anything or pushed or whatever. Like the actors are portraying, doing this kind of funny thing, but against their will so well.
Right? You're not just dancing. You have to play it like you're unwillingly dancing.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny. This scene is so weird, but it's so iconic.
It is, yeah.
The song.
I mean, I like this song is in my shuffle.
Yeah.
And it's because of this movie.
Sure, totally.
Yeah.
Kind of like jumping the line at the end of it. Like after it was playing, Federica put it on and we were like bopping to it. It's such an amazing song.
Harry Belafonte, R.I.P. Just died recently.
Yeah. See, but then we get the horror. What a weird scene. It's so funny and weird and goofy and 60s campy almost. And then that's horrifying. Like these hand shrimp things coming out at the end.
Yep.
It's so perfect.
Just calling back to what we were talking about earlier, I look at like the Frighteners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So similar. It's Peter Jackson's sensibility, like pre-Lord of the Rings Peter Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Was kind of a different beast, right?
Oh, yeah, very much.
And really he had these quirky comedy / horror sensibilities, which, to me, I draw a line between Beetlejuice and the Frighteners. They're very similar to me.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I never thought of that, but I completely see it. And I think that's why I like the Frighteners.
Yeah.
I like that balance. Yeah, that's a good. By the way, I mean, if people have missed that movie, I had missed it for a long time, and then I know Sean was a big fan of it, our mutual friend, and he had it on his shelf when we were roommates. So one day I just popped it in, and I was like, "Whoa, how did I miss this?"
Oh, what a gem, right?
Total gem. You get this awesome Michael J. Fox movie that you may not have seen. That's this awesome horror comedy.
And it balances. It's like horror, comedy, and heart. It gets all three.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's not easy to do.
Yeah. I've had that happen I can count on one hand where I'm like, where's this movie been? This movie's been missing from my life. Contact was one of them, the Zemeckis movie.
That's a good one too.
I didn't see it till way later, and I was like, this is so me. How did I miss this all these years? And Frighteners.
It's these Back to the Future connections you've somehow missed.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, just surprising. You think I would hunt all those down?
Yeah, I mean, Frighteners is like the final time Michael J. Fox was like the above the line star, you know, of a movie anyway.
And there's that famous outtake, right, where he's like yelling a lot, and he just goes, "Doc." And so I think Jackson has to be like, "You just said Doc." He's like, "Oh,
oops,"
just in his brain somewhere, you know. So funny.
See, I think the interesting dilemma that the script has is that we are on the side of the Maitlands, but we can't dislike the Dietzes either. Right? Like, that's the weird thing, right? Like, it's like, we're not like, oh, get them out of there. We're kind of like, just like, come on, coexist. You know, that's really what we want.
I think that's what's nice about it, because you could imagine a version where they're ugly people.
Right, exactly.
I mean? They're rude or mean or hateful or something. But by the end of the film, I love that it culminates in, well, let's all live together in harmony. Like, we find the balance.
Yeah, I was reading about how one of the initial drafts has the Dietzes. Well, Charles and Delia, they leave. They go back to New York, and they leave Lydia to be raised by the Maitlands.
Which is kind of weird.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm not sure I like that. I like it better the way it ended up, you know?
Agreed. Yeah. I don't know. It's fun. I mean, it's funny because now my mind is spinning a little bit. Like, you could sort of do a version where they're terrible.
Right.
And maybe they're like sort of like Matilda type.
Yes.
Parental types, you know, and they're
or like Harry Potter's
exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So I can sort of see that, but I like this better.
They're just kind of clueless, which I think works better for the story that they're telling.
Yeah, they're tacky.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, really, when you think about it, despite Burton's protestations about the mundanity of suburbia, this is sort of a paean to suburbia, right? Because the Maitlands are our entry point characters, and we're looking askance at these big city folks. Right?
Yeah. That's funny.
You can see why, by the way, when it was announced that Michael Keaton was playing Batman, why the fans had such a series of shit fits over it.
I mean, what do you have before this, right? You have like Gung Ho, Mr. Mom, and this. It's it's hard to imagine, like a square jawed, right? Like sort of hero in a cape.
Yeah, I mean, again, I had the benefit of not knowing who Michael Keaton was, so my first exposure to, before I even knew his name, I saw him in the suit, and I was like, done deal, sign me up.
Yeah.
But yeah, you see this and you're like, he's Batman.
Yeah. So, I mean, you really kind of then have to give some credit to Tim Burton also for his casting.
Yeah. Yeah. And Keaton said that he thought it wasn't so much that he had worked with him on this. It was that he had seen Clean and Sober. And based on that, that's Keaton's assumption. Also interesting here, as far as the snake. First of all, I love the stop motion.
Yeah.
They were originally going to do kind of like go motion, like the Ed 209 and RoboCop, but it was too expensive, so they did it the old-fashioned way. But originally, the snake was supposed to just look like a snake.
Oh, interesting.
And the studio people were like, he should have Beetlejuice's head, because otherwise it'll just, we won't know it's Beetlejuice. We'll just think it's like a creature that Beetlejuice sent. And this is where I say, we can't dismiss studio notes out of hand.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes they're good notes.
Totally. I know
Right?
it's funny. Studio executives get a lot of crap, and for very good reason, a lot of the times. But I was actually
Yes.
just talking to a friend of mine who works at a studio, and he was working closely on a movie that did very well this summer. And he was saying that the executive who's tied to that movie really cares, like is really invested in it, loves movies. Some of these people just want to become heads of studios someday, and want the title or whatever. And some people just freaking love movies and
Right.
want to make them the best they can. And so it's really cool when those people get to help plus movies.
That's the thing, right? Because it has become such an industry cliche about the role executives play in just shaving away any authenticity and personality. Like
Mhm.
Kevin Smith has made a whole career out of dunking on John Peters and what he did with Superman.
Sure.
And that's sort of like the worst case example. But yeah, there's plenty of times where ideally, if it's a truly collaborative creative process, then you have little things and big things. I mean big picture, does the putting Beetlejuice's head on the snake matter that much? Maybe not, but that's an example of, well, that's a smart choice that the filmmakers didn't think about,
Mhm.
but it ends up having a positive impact on the film.
Totally. Speaking of Kevin Smith, we may as well. He's quite famous for talking about
Yes,
almost being attached to a Beetlejuice sequel. What was it? Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian.
that was the initial title. Yep.
Yeah, like they presented that to Kevin Smith to possibly have a stab at, and Kevin Smith's famous line is, "Must we go tropical?"
Now, what's interesting to me is that at that stage, I don't even believe the intention was for Tim Burton to helm it. It
Can you imagine? What's
you
the
know,
point?
and that's right. Like I'm like, why even bother?
Yeah. Very curious what that would have
Like,
been.
this is via Wikipedia. It says the story followed the Dietz family moving to Hawaii, where Charles is developing a resort. They soon discover that his company is building on the burial ground of an ancient Hawaiian kahuna. His spirit comes back from the afterlife to cause trouble, and Beetlejuice becomes a hero by winning a surf contest with magic. It says here, Michael Keaton and Winona Ryder agreed to do the film on the condition that Burton directed, but both he and Keaton became occupied with Batman Returns.
Okay. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
I love this, by the way,
Yeah,
that
Smith.
the people in the background. Sorry, behind the Maitlands. You know what I'm talking about? See that window where there's like someone eating popcorn, watching them. It's very unsettling,
It is.
right? I don't even know what I'm looking at, but I love it because it unsettles me. Sorry, you were saying Kevin Smith?
No, it says the Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian script is still owned by the Geffen Company and will likely never get made. So I guess
Yeah.
Cooler heads have prevailed.
Yeah. Don't you wish sometimes these famous unproduced scripts would be in some sort of, I don't know, like library somewhere or a collection that you could read?
Man, you're not kidding. I just saw somebody on in one of my social media feeds literally yesterday, posted a copy of the script for Superman, the new movie. And this was the planned 5th Christopher Reeve movie that was going to be produced by the Salkinds.
Oh.
And I don't know how this person got a hold of it, but boy, howdy, do I want to read that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess occasionally, often even, some of these things do turn up.
Mm-hmm.
But like the Frank Darabont Indiana Jones script.
Yes.
I remember
which I read,
thinking,
and it's quite
wow,
good.
I'd give anything to read that. And then like a couple weeks later it popped up. I was like, well,
Yep. or the Colin Trevorrow Star Wars Episode 9.
Yeah, exactly. So every now and then. This feels like something.
How many girls that you went to high school with were like full on Tim Burton phase? Like dressing like Tim Burton characters, and they were like, because that was like definitely a thing when I was in high school.
Not as many as you would think. To my memory.
I feel like every class I was in had at least one like really hardcore Tim Burton fan.
I could just be forgetting because I'm trying to think it was probably most likely people who were in my art classes and things.
Mm-hmm.
I remember The Crow being huge.
Oh, The Crow was huge. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, especially
Big
with
time.
that sort of crowd.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of
see this right here. That was the action figure. That was the Adam Maitland action figure with weird freaking nightmare face.
That is a very face from your nightmares.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But still sort of weirdly amusing.
See, but what's funny, now bear in mind, I saw the toys before I saw the movie. So I just see it's like Adam with like his Alec Baldwin. Okay, this right there. Look at that. I was watching this with my daughter and I was like, oh boy, hopefully I don't have to see it.
Yeah.
You know, but I saw the toys first, and it has like again regular Adam face, and then there's like a swappable beak face. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. I had no context. You see it in the movie, I'm like, that's an odd thing to turn into a toy, you know?
Right. I know. See, you know what? I think my memory of those images is I probably saw this poster. Oh wait, this is the scene. I don't think
yeah, this is where Brian gets sad.
I was like, oh damn, these kids. Like, yeah. I mean, they don't look like kids; they look like 35-year-old men. But, I think it was like a comic book I had the poster for Beetlejuice.
Okay.
And those weird versions of the Maitlands was on it, and I was like, "What the hell am I looking at?" This is one of those things too. I remember, like from all the commercials and trailers, "I'm the ghost with the most, babe."
Yeah, I had a Beetlejuice T-shirt that said that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it was Beetlejuice from the cartoon.
Yeah. You know, it's funny too, and maybe I'm wrong. I've only seen this a handful of times. I haven't seen it like a ton. But it does seem to sort of introduce rules as the movie goes along.
Yeah.
Where it's like, if we get married, I'll be free. And even like free to do what? I don't know. But it's just one of those movies that is so like convinced of itself that you're like, oh, well, I don't want that.
Yeah.
You know, like you just buy it all and you're like, oh, well,
if
crap.
you say so.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
So, movie.
I don't know. It just kind of works.
Here, I just sent you a link to the Adam Maitland action figure. You can take a look at that.
Let me see. It's kind of funny too. I'm waiting for this thing to arrive. Federica yelled through the wall. Again, we were in opposite rooms watching this. Just to be clear. But she was like, how old is Winona Ryder? Because like the whole him wanting to marry her thing.
Right.
And I feel like the movie takes the steps to be like, this is so I can be free. I need like a legally binding marriage so I can be free. And it's not that he's in love with her or anything.
Right. Man, I'm scrolling down and just looking at all these action figures. I'm like, man, what a bygone era.
Wait, did you email it or text it?
I sent it to you in the Zencaster thing.
Oh. I was looking in the wrong place. That's kind of fun.
I love how people are getting a behind the scenes look at it.
I know. This is the stuff that usually gets cut out. Oh. Wow.
That's a weird toy. Like what kid wants that, you know?
It's weird because it looks like he's wearing a fez.
It does. Yeah, I think it's supposed to be a baseball cap, I think.
Yeah, like a backwards baseball cap or something.
Yeah.
And
because you can like take his head off. His head comes off.
Oh, yeah.
So there's some kind of a mechanism inside the head.
I do like the one with the bat ears and the sort of circus.
Yeah,
tent
the circus
top.
one.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
Actually,
I had exploding Beetlejuice.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah,
What does he do? Oh, his chest bursts open?
Yeah.
Wow.
There's like a little gizmo. He would break apart and his head is attached to like a bug body.
Horrifying. The one with the purple suit, I guess the spinning head, that's actually a really great looking action figure.
Yeah, that's the one I should have got.
Or I just mean it looks like, you want to get the thing that looks like the thing from the movie and it rarely does.
Yeah. Yeah.
It actually looks like him from the movie.
Yeah, that's right. That's what he wears later. Yeah, I'm getting nostalgic looking at these toys.
Yeah, these are kind of fun. I love that. Of course, he has to have a vehicle.
the
creepy
the
cruiser.
Beetlemobile or whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, you can kind of imagine Alec Baldwin not being sure what to make of what they're making. You have this heartfelt scene with Gina Davis.
So I was actually wondering if that was even Alec Baldwin under all that.
That's a good point.
Right?
Maybe not. But him being like, what are we doing here?
Right. Well, even with this big schnoz right there.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a little bit of darkness you can imagine in a movie these days. You might not have this teenage girl writing her suicide note.
Right. I was thinking that. Yeah, watching that.
I think I read somewhere too that was an alternate ending where she was going to be dead and with them.
Oh my God.
And they were saying, what was it? According to producer Larry Wilson, the original ending, the film would have ended with Lydia dying in a fire and joining her friends in the afterlife. They changed it, considering the message it would send to young people that death would be a happy ending.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of funny.
How do you even get there?
I could see, if you're writing some sort of dark movie, like you said, it's an idea, and then you go, that's a bad idea, and you tweak it.
No, I take back everything I said, Brian. I was wrong.
I was going to say, it immediately reminds me of Heathers, because that was going to be the original ending, where they were going to blow up the school, and all the kids were going to be dead, and it was going to be a prom in heaven. And then they were like, no, that's insane. And so then, it ends with her literally almost like a Wile E. Coyote character. Do you remember? She walks out and she's got like black soot all over her face, smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
Like all the kids survived the bomb.
Weird how that was just like a trend briefly. Like, yeah, and then you die and you're in heaven and you're happy. It's like that Christopher Reeve movie. Oh, damn it. What's it called? Somewhere in Time?
Oh,
Somewhere
okay.
in Time with Jane Seymour.
I've never seen that.
Well, sorry, I just spoiled the ending, but
No, still.
that's a very beloved, like a cult movie,
and
I don't like it at all because I think the ending is terrible.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's me. That's how I roll.
That's how I roll. Okay, wait, I have to mention this real quick because I'm looking at Catherine O'Hara and I'm looking at all the set design. So apparently there's a story that I really love where the production designer, Bo Welch, kind of had a crush on Catherine O'Hara while they were making the movie.
That's right.
And so he went to Tim Burton and was like, I don't know, like, I kind of, Catherine's kind of cute and I think I might kind of like her. And Tim Burton's basically like, well, go ask her out. And Bo Welch was like, oh, we can do that? Like I can talk to the actress and actually ask her out. I love that Burton like, well, go ask her out.
Come on, stupid.
I know. And so he did, and they're married to this day.
To this day. Isn't that a nice story?
It is. I love it. I mean, what if he hadn't asked?
Nothing ventured, nothing gained. I think that's the lesson, right?
Yeah. And then Bo Welch went on to be production designer on Edward Scissorhands, Men in Black, Batman Returns.
He's done all right.
He directed the series of Unfortunate Events, the series version. The
series, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Also interesting. Talk about quirks of fate. Burton wanted Anton Furst to be the production designer on this.
Yeah.
And he was unavailable, so that's why he got Bo Welch. And so when you think of again, Bo Welch may never have met his future wife.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If Anton Furst had been available,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, I don't know, how different would this movie have been also, And then you think of Batman. Right. What if Anton Furst hadn't done Batman? How different would that movie be? And it's...
Man.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Like, quote John Connor, messes with your head. So this whole seance / accidental exorcism, this is just one of those things too, where you look at the tone of it and you're like, he just gets it just right. Like this could
That's
be
the
right.
yeah. It's you really have to feel it here. I love the look on Gina Davis's face right there as she reaches out to Winona Ryder.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to. It's weird, right? Because we're watching them die,
Yes.
and we have to really feel the horror of that, but it can't be too horrific. You know, it's like real. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. Is it's like it's really freaking scary. Like her,
Yep.
her deteriorating and the
Mhm.
tone of it and everything, but it's also it's just scary enough.
Yes.
And it stays within the tone of the film that we've had so far.
Right.
And it's sad.
That's right. Well, I mean, like that right. I mean, her face looks like almost like it looks like a Tim Burton drawing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? But there's something sweet about how he's reaching for her and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And then of course when Beetlejuice is unleashed, we get into the sort of campy, fun, haunted carnival vibe, and it turns into like a creepy Looney Tunes cartoon or something, where he's got inflatable hammer hands and
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. This, I used to say that I felt like this movie when people would say like, do you like Beetlejuice? I'm like, I do, but to me, it almost feels more like an awesome video installation than like a movie, which sounds kind of harsh, but like, I think that's kind of how I felt about it for a long time. But then I rewatched it on an airplane, not terribly long ago. And I was like, wait, this movie is like amazing. Like, how did I kind of sleep on this for so long? And I think the reason is I was just so used to seeing it on TV in bits.
How fun.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah, no, it's kind of cool, but I don't see how this all goes together. But when you do watch it together, this movie has a really weird rhythm and like energy. And that's its strength, right?
Yeah.
Like when you see it all together, that's what makes this movie this weird little piece of magic. And so I was kind of glad that I watched it again and, kind of reappreciated it.
Well, it's like when we reach this point in the story, like this is the trick, right? Like Beetlejuice as a character, we don't know how we feel about him, but we have to be, we in the audience have to be like, yes, release Beetlejuice.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
So it's like everything before this moment with regards to the character has to tread that line of like, we like him, we're not sure what we think of him, we don't hate him, how do we feel? But this has to be kind of a triumphant moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To save our heroes, yeah.
Yeah,
But then he's this chaotic sort of thing, where it's like, all right, now that he is unleashed, he's dangerous, but funny.
Exactly. Right, right, exactly.
Like, I love this whole idea, just, putting them on, I don't know what you call those things. You use a hammer to hit a thing and a thing rises up.
Doesn't this feel like something out of Batman Returns or something?
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of that.
Well, Bo Welch, I guess. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just looking at like everything in the frame, the light, the colors, the little crisscrossing shadows in the background. It's just, I don't know. I mean, you just don't get that a lot from a lot of filmmakers these days. I feel like they sort of, they put the thought that they put into it and then they just kind of capture stuff and cut it together. And that's a style too. But like, there's just so much thoughtfulness in every frame here.
So here's my question. Did Beetlejuice, because they couldn't stop the exorcism.
Mm-hmm.
So did Beetlejuice, because I don't think the movie clarifies.
That was actually a question for me too.
Yeah. Because next time we see them, they're normal.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
By implication, he probably did something, but I just wanted to make sure. I don't think the movie clarifies that he undid it or something.
You're saying with what Otho was doing, was Beetlejuice intervening a little bit and making it go south so he could be released?
you can read it both ways, right? It's like Otho either doesn't know what he's doing or
Yeah.
Beetlejuice is. But regardless, the Maitlands get back to normal. So how does that happen, right? Unless there was some that's why I'm like, well, maybe Beetlejuice was kind of like putting his thumb on the scale, and then once he like it was easy for him to undo it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I honestly, I'm not clear.
Yeah.
It is funny though. I mean, you think like now in a world where you can do anything with computers, and I don't mean to turn
See, real quick, sorry, Brian.
Yeah.
If you look, the Maitlands are like
Healing?
like they're youthifying.
Yeah.
How does that happen? See?
Yeah. I don't know. Like, why is the exorcism being undone?
Did Beetlejuice do that? That was my question. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, you don't have the tools that we have now, but watching this with the sound off, this still feels as sort of weirdly small scale as it is. It still feels big and chaotic. I can feel the energy through the screen.
I love that.
Chaotic. You know what I mean? Yeah. Even though there's not like crazy things flying around in the air or anything like that. You know.
And there he is in that purple suit. That's the forced wedding action figure.
Yeah, exactly.
You can restage. You can restage this sequence.
Yeah. That's really funny. No, you bring up a good point though. Now that I think about it, I'm just swept up in the feeling of everything that's going on that I didn't think about what's happening with the Maitlands.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny you get these chompy teeth.
Yeah.
Skirting around. It's kind of like Batman when the Joker spits them out.
There you go. That's if he would have put them into more of his movies, we would have found like a recurring Tim Burton motif.
Yeah, like Spielberg and divorced dads and
yeah, Tim Burton and chompy teeth.
Chompy teeth. See, I love all.
See, that's my question: is how did they get rejuvenated?
Yeah, I don't know.
Again, I'm assuming Beetlejuice. At the very least, he stopped the exorcism in some way. But I feel like that's something that the movie should have kind of clarified.
Yeah. And maybe it's one of those things you sort of learn where they filmed it or whatever, but it's like people wanted to stick with the forward motion that was happening and they weren't missing it.
I think that's probably likely. See, again, watching, as Beetlejuice tries to force Lydia to marry him, and then thinking of the animated show where she and Beetlejuice go off and have these adventures, I'm like, man, that must have been a really awkward conversation.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like Biff at the end of Back to the Future, where it's like, oh, Biff, that guy, and it's like, oh, he tried to do some really awful things,
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah, I wouldn't let him into my house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kind of like marveling at everything that's happening here. We got Gina Davis like riding on the back of a sandworm and
Lisanal Gabe.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what's missing in this.
This is like a really thrilling ending. I just never thought about it. I've just seen it so many times, you know what I mean? But like when you're really staring at it. It's sweet. Now they can see the ghosts. The Dietzes.
So why is that?
Because it feels nice. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. They don't get into. I mean, you can imagine a movie being like when high emotions are involved, sometimes ghosts can be visible or something, but I don't think we get anything like that.
I mean, here's the thought. Maybe are they even dead anymore?
Like, were they given a chance to come back?
I mean, maybe there's nothing to say that they're dead here.
I mean, he does have like a little supernatural act where he starts the music.
Sure. So they're like,
when they're levitating.
I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but
that's true. I don't know. I mean, I take it as they're dead here.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm assuming I agree with you, but
this is really sweet, though. They get to be the parents they wanted to be. She gets to kind of have the parents she relates to a little bit more. But,
the
it's not like
can
she's
ignore their daughter.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say it's not like at the same time. If they had moved back to the city, it'd be like, like
Yeah.
they'd be terrible people. But it's like I don't know. They've all found a way to coexist in this place
Right.
together, which seems to be a happy situation. I like it. What did he say? It reads like a what?
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, and I mean, come on, like this is like one of the greatest numbers. Like a movie ending on a number to like make you dancing as you walk out of the theater, jump in the line. Come on, you know what I mean?
Yeah. He said it reads like stereo instructions, by the way.
Oh, I see. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I don't know. This just puts you in like the perfect mood. Like seeing this teenager who was like formerly depressed, levitating with her ghost friends, dancing to this number, the ghost football players on the staircase.
Yeah.
It just really like encapsulates what this movie is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it has this unique sensibility, and it makes me happy that sensibility was allowed to come through, and for a variety of reasons. I think the fact that it was relatively low budget,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that it wasn't something that was ignored and then found an audience later. No, it was embraced when it came out.
Yeah.
Right. It made $75 million against a $15 million budget, that's just all upside.
Crazy. I love that, by the way.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, it makes me laugh whenever he swaps the number, the waiting in line thing, that he doesn't even do it well. Like he just like, throws it. He throws it in the guy's lap. I don't know. Anyway, sorry, what were you saying?
No, I mean, it's a movie that's really had a strong, and I promise I'm not trying to make a pun, but it's had a strong afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are, this many decades later, and a sequel is actually happening. That's amazing.
Incredible. And there was a whole Broadway musical, which I haven't seen.
So much merch.
So much merch. Oh, I mean, I bet with this movie coming out now, I don't know. I could imagine there's gonna be a ton of stuff. But
well, there we go.
This
was Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice, man. I'm really happy. I've always found it like fun and amusing when I've happened upon it on TV. But I'm really glad that I've sort of really looked at it again and come around on really appreciating how amazing it is.
I'm glad too, Brian, because honestly, this has been a conversation I've wanted to have with you for a long time. I was really disappointed in your lack of affinity for Beetlejuice. It was honestly, it was a barrier in our friendship.
Well, I'm so glad those walls have come down.
Yeah, that's right. This is just one more point of agreement.
Yeah.
No, the truth is, this is not a film I revisited a ton after it came out, but it was something that started getting repeat viewings for me with each of my kids. And I think that's why for me, I've always viewed it as a family movie, and even the kind of the scarier elements like Gina Davis pulling her face off and stuff, I found it quirky, in the most sort of charming way, and again, it going back to what I was saying before, it's just I miss when movies like this were more common and there were these kind of wild swings, and the budgets allowed for those wild swings,
that. And also, we were talking about how this movie's PG. I kind of miss 80s PG movies.
Yeah, man.
Which is not the same as like a PG movie today. Like they were just
like Monster Squad and Goonies and stuff.
Yeah, and Back to the Future and like I don't know. There was just this interesting tone that they had that's really special. And a lot of those movies have lived on all these years later because there's just something to them. And I don't quite know how to sum it up, but this is included among them. Like you said, calling this crazy movie a family movie is
Right.
nuts, but I agree with you. You know, like it just
Yeah.
struck this perfect chord.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it.
Well, there we go. That wraps up our conversation about Beetlejuice. Hopefully, we had something worthwhile to say, but hey, let us know. Let us know your thoughts on Beetlejuice. You can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and message us there. As always, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, leave a star rating. If you like what we're doing, please let people know. And with that, on behalf of my partner Brian Hall, my name is Zaki Hassan. This has been our commentary track for Beetlejuice. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you next time.